Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Welcome back for another episode, and you're in for a uber treat today. Why? Because I'm in for an uber treat. And the reason we're both in for a treat is I'm with Professor Anika Jackson. Professor Jackson, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Tom, thank you so much. I always love having conversations with you.
So we have had the opportunity to visit on another podcast. I had the chance to meet her last week at Podfest Expo, and now we're doing a podcast really focusing on the scope of her work now. And she's a podcaster. She is the professor of podcasting. She teaches at the University of Southern California, and she brings students to Podfest Expo. So it doesn't get
Thanks
much
to you.
better than
Thanks
that
to you.
package. Tell us about your journey into podcasting.
I have always loved bringing people together. And it used to be in person when I was younger, starting with being a club promoter and getting people to come together around music or art or something like that. And I see that as the through line to where I am today, very much, which is a lot of people would look at me and say, you were a club promoter, right? You threw parties. I did at a very special time in my life. And that parlayed into working in other clubs. That was in Kansas City. So I had to be front and center of people. I was emceeing events from a very young age and did that in pretty much every city I've been in since then. And that got me comfortable being in front of a crowd. And I do think that's an important skill. Even if we're doing one-to-one, we may not have people watching live. It's still really important to be able to build that rapport with the person you're speaking with, but also with the audience who is listening to us or going to watch this later. Essentially what happened, I was emceeing a lot of events. At this point, I was living in Houston, Texas, and a woman reached out to me because of the work I was doing. I had a small company called Philanthropic Fets, and we threw events for nonprofits in Houston market. We also paired them with corporations and brands that wanted to get more involved in philanthropy. And she said, hey, I'm doing a radio show called Real Beauty, Real Women. And this radio show will highlight good work that people are doing in the community. And I think you'd be a great host. So we met, we immediately hit it off. We were both, I think, very down to earth. I wanted to have all my soup. So I didn't just use a spoon, but I was like, I'm sorry, I have to slurp this up. And we're off to the races. And Jacqueline Aludo got me started on the journey that was radio and moved into podcasting. So in Houston for 3 years, funnily enough, we started around the time of Hurricane Harvey. We had a show that was terrestrial radio, digital radio, and Facebook Live, different sets, moving around, having to work with a lot of different people. So it was a little bit more complex than this medium of us speaking one-to-one. I moved back to LA in 2019. We tried to keep the show going, but then it was a little difficult with everybody's schedules. Had a PR firm, had a couple clients who said, hey, we hear about podcasts. We don't really know what to do, but we want to start one. I said, okay. So as part of their PR services, I started their podcasts. They did the cover art. They did the intros, outros, the music. I hosted, picked all the guests. My team edited. And then I'd provide them with all these great materials, and they just didn't know what to do with them. They didn't have the bandwidth. They didn't have the team. They were both startups. So I said, look, this isn't really going to work. I'm not paying myself anything. I'm barely paying my team, but I'm investing a lot of time, and I don't see you using this. So I love you guys, but this is not going to be this can't be part of our deal unless you can start paying me more. And they couldn't. So at that point, I had to part ways. My boyfriend said, you love speaking to people. You're used to doing that. Why don't you just start your own podcast? He's a film guy, editor. He said, I'll edit it for you. I'll help you get started. So that's how I really got into podcasting, starting with a couple of other people's podcasts, then deciding to transition to my own.
And what is your either professional brand or your professional consulting firm?
Yeah, Your Brand Amplified is the name of the podcast. That originally started as the tagline for my PR business, which was Anika PR. I didn't come up with a fancy name because it grew fast and I didn't know what to call it. So I just called it after myself. And then that became the name of the podcast. And since then, it's morphed into, at some points, I've done a lot of consulting for people, for brand, for PR. I still do a little bit of that, but now I mostly do podcast consulting because it is the ultimate medium for branding, communication strategy, thought leadership, right? Public relations awareness, all of that, social media content. And so Your Brand Amplified is still my main moniker. I have Your Branded Podcast, which is what I've named the arm that does production, but it's all still under the same umbrella company.
And then you're also involved in academia. And as I've told you, I'm the son of a professor, so I'm always very interested in anyone who's involved in academia. And you're involved in academia around podcasting. So I'm doubly interested. So tell us about that.
During the pandemic, I was headhunted to move back east, perhaps, and become a professor at a very prestigious university in the Boston area. Not the big one that probably everybody's thinking of, but a very nice one. They're looking to diversify who they had on staff. And I said, I don't even have a master's degree yet. So I never thought I would be able to teach, even though I come from a line of teachers and educators and social workers and people who are in service. And they said, no, you're a professor of the practice. I said, oh, that makes okay, that I can get my head around. So I went through the process, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I hadn't thought about what course would I create or any of that. So I told a mentor of mine at USC, who was a friend who I'd brought out for an event in Houston, and then we'd stayed in touch. I just got headhunted, cold email on LinkedIn, and I had been podcasting already. He said, why don't you come guest lecture for one of my classes? So I did it over Zoom because it was still pandemic time, not in person. And he apparently liked what he saw. So I said, okay, we're going to get you in here. And so that's how I got into teaching in 2022. And the podcast was not the class I was teaching at the time. I was teaching PR and branding, but it is certainly a large part of why I got hired. Yes, I had a background in digital. I've been working in digital since the late 90s, early 2000s. Before that, I'd been working in magazine publishing and other stuff. But podcasting really helped me get into USC. Now I teach for 2 graduate programs, the Master's in Digital Media Management, Digital Social Media. And last year I was approached, we need some more elective classes for the DSM, Digital Social Media Master's program. What would you pitch? So I pitched a few ideas and they said, podcasting, that's the one we want. So I'd originally already developed this as a course for entrepreneurs based on everything I learned, all the good, the bad, the ugly, places where I spent money where I shouldn't have, things I learned that worked really well. And I brought it to USC instead. And this is the second term that we are having this class. I also mentor a lot of students who might not be in that class or that program, but who also are podcasters. I'm just really passionate about bringing this medium to life, showing people that it's not oversaturated, and helping them hopefully learn how to do it effectively so it lasts for a lot longer than 8 to 10 episodes, and that they can actually figure out how to make this a big part of their business.
Are you helping them create a business model around their podcast? So if they chose to, they could try to monetize that in a professional way, either during school or even after graduation?
100%. The course is called Podcasting for Brand Building. It's really Indie Podcaster 101. How you build your brand, but let's start with the business of podcasting. And let's really look at it as a business, because I will tell you, it took me 3 years of podcasting as a hobby for somebody to sit me down and say, you just told me this. I looked you up on Listen Notes. So you have a business here. This is not a hobby, a very expensive hobby. So I take my students through the whole process of, you might not need to think about this now, but do you need to trademark something? Do you need to create an LLC? Is this an extension of another brand that you already have? So it's just a revenue to promote. It's an avenue to promote what your brand already is. And so when do you need to start thinking about these things? So I want them to start thinking about that from the beginning, before we even go through the brand of their podcast, before we get to actually the production side and anything else. So whether they start it as a business now, or they start as a business down the road, they're already thinking about that process. They might, and that's part of what they have to present. It's just going to be me. I'm just doing a DBA right now. But when I get to this level, then I'm going to create an LLC for myself, or I'm going to look at other ways to make this a full business. I always want them to think with that end in mind. Don't do what I did, because I probably could have had a lot more success a lot earlier if I'd looked at it that way. I wouldn't have learned all the lessons that I can now teach people, but I really want them to be able to see, yeah, this is a viable business. And guess what? We live in LA. There are a lot of businesses here that want your skill set. A lot of these big studios, now all of them have podcasts for every single show. Or a lot of our student population is from overseas. If you're going to go back to China, if you're going to go to Ecuador or wherever you moved here from to go to this university, you also have these great skills that you can take into a company and be their go-to. for production and for this side of branding and marketing.
And that was really the other area I wanted to explore, training them to work in the podcast industry. How about that part of it?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I have had students come to me who have already been producing podcasts, but they've never done it themselves. So they're now having to go through that process. And I do think whether they decide to continue hosting a podcast or not, it gives them a leg up because they've seen every side. I'll say, you're not going to be a great host if you don't know how to be a great guest and a gracious guest. And it's really nice to see how other people treat the guest experience. So then you know what to do or what not to do. I would say, Tom, you go above and beyond with the work and the effort that you and your team put into the guest experience. And it's fabulous. I wish everybody did that. Right. And so I show them, here's what I do. Here are the systems and processes. Here's how you can set up everything on the production side. And guess what? You don't have to stay a host, you're going to host something for this class and you're going to put out a few episodes. And this semester, I'm actually, if they are more comfortable, I have students who are going to put out their podcast in Chinese because that's more comfortable to them. And that's actually, they're planning to interview with companies in China and go back and work there. Right. So I really want them to see every side. Not everybody wants to be front and center. Most people are going to want to be behind the scenes. And so it's really important that they have the right skills and that they understand how to use AI in podcasting. What part needs to stay human centered, right? And all the different things, because there's 1,000,001 classes and courses and tools you can use if you just search the internet. And what I use might not be perfect for them, but at least it gives them a start and a place to jump off from.
Do your students understand the need for personal branding, literally any part of your professional career, but most particularly at their point of either their academic or as they're starting their own professional career? Do they see the power in building your own brand and having it something that you can take with you literally anywhere?
That is such a great question. And Tom, I truly feel that most of them come to a master's program because that is what helps them create their personal brand. They have a portfolio now. They know what they're invested in. And we do walk through brand blueprint, no matter what class, and maybe not so much in the digital media management classes, but I always talk about brand. And I introduce myself as a brand, and I talk about my experiences and my nonlinear journeys to show them that all of these things still make up who you are as a person in a brand that then share and show how you add value to others, whether that's a company, whether that's a partner, family member, community, whatever the case may be. So they do start understanding it. And if I'm teaching a PR class or I'm teaching my podcast class or capstone, 100%, we are walking through that brand blueprint and you're figuring out not just for your podcast, but yourself, what does that mean? Who are you? What are you meant to be here to do? And how do you make sure everything's in alignment with that vision for your future? Because it makes it a heck of a lot easier to know what to say yes to or no to. If you are really centered in your brand ethos, it makes it a lot easier for you to market yourself and talk to people about who you are when you're staying true to your values.
And does it give the students actually almost a deliverable they can bring to a potential employer?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah.
I am excited to try and work with universities as much as I can because number one, I see obviously the next generation of students as the next generation of podcasters. And wherever you and I might have started or taken our own podcast and our own journey, they'll take it in as many infinite varieties that we can't even think of right now.
Yeah.
But I also want them to understand that you can make a career out of this if you enjoy it. And I love it and I made a career out of it.
I never would have imagined that I'd be a podcaster full time. But I was a publicist. I was in communications and marketing. So I should have maybe thought that had an inkling, right? But I love this medium like you do so much. And you pour so much into other people and helping them be successful in podcasting, whether it's the people who are part of your network or the students that you sponsor to go to these podcast conferences. And my students got so much value out of going to PodFest with us last week. And they're great champions for me too. They were finding people who need podcast services. They're like, you have to meet our professor. But they're also making they weren't there to do that. They were there to make their own connections and figure out their own journeys. But I agree, there are so many careers in podcasting. And this is like I said, it's the best medium and avenue we have for marketing ourselves, for branding, for social media content, for all the things that you think about when you're trying to get your brand out there. So, to that point, you know this, not a lot of people do yet, but at USC, we are going to be holding a podcast conference in the fall. And you're going to be a big part of that. And part of that is also going to be having a career track so students can see all of the possibilities. You don't have to be in front of the camera. There are so many other roles, and we need really good people to be in these roles so that there is a great future ahead and we're not just seeing AI slop.
A couple of years back, I somehow got introduced, or two BYU students reached out to me, and for their graduate class, they could, instead of writing a thesis, they could create a business.
Mm,
And the business they created was a podcast editorial business. So like Descript Lite, basically.
wow.
And they had a really slick tool. Just it did two or three things, but it did them very well. And it was a male and a female. And they came to Podfest on the Pay It Forward program a couple of times. And the second time, because once you come once, you're part of the family, they were able to actually make deals with other companies. So that part worked for them in addition to the educational component. So I hope we can really evangelize the Pay It Forward program, and love to have more of your students next year.
Yeah.
Because I've already told Chris I'm going to do it again.
Amazing.
There's another side of you and your work, and that's the holistic side of your work. So could you tell us about the mindfulness, Zen, and purpose-driven leadership and purpose-driven businesses?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. I think that's part of my core values is we have to really think about the impact we want to make in the world. And it is a heck of a lot easier to think about making an impact on a few people, but a deep impact than trying to be everything to everybody. My core issues that I identified through reading books, through learning and growing in my nonprofit journey, and really accumulating 15 years ago with being president of Junior League of Los Angeles for their 85th anniversary. We're at 100 years now, so really excited about that. I said, I've gone through all these great training. I've been really well trained on how to lead volunteers, how to set budgets, how to work with community partners, what questions to ask if you're serving on a board. What am I going to do next? So that really crystallized around I love education. And a part of that also involves health and wellness. But if children have a chance to get an education, so many other things, trafficking, child marriage, a lot of other issues in the world go away. Because the more time that they can spend in school and get educated, the more opportunities they have after that to go on to university or to get good jobs. So I've really focused on education. And what came out of that was helping a couple of friends start a nonprofit called Learn, Grow, Lead. We focus on Cape Coast, Ghana. Our partner there is Children Helpers Foundation, and we pay for kids to go to school who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity. What does that look like, right? Some of the schools are now free, but you still have to pay for books, uniforms, all the other things that they're not provided just by these schools. And if kids don't have those, they can't attend school. Then we realized some of the kids don't have a safe place to live. They're sleeping wherever they can find. One girl, she was in her grandmother's home because her father had passed away. Her mom had gone to another city to try to make a living. Her step grandfather kicked her out. She came home from school one day, all of her stuff. We don't want you here anymore. Where are these kids supposed to go? So we built a home, Shaisiri home, and we have 26 kids who can live in the home. And then we built organic farming, right? We got grants, and then we just bought some acreage so that our partner can have self-sufficiency. So that's a really long answer, but it's something that I'm really passionate about is how do we figure out how to make impact on people who otherwise would not have that chance? How do we give a hand up, not a hand out? And so that's part of what we're trying to do. So I look for places like that where I can make impact, and I've done a lot of different impact work. And part of that goes along with no matter how little or how much I'm making at any one time in my business, I'm going to put some money into charitable work where I know it's directly affecting a population, not where it's just going into a marketing budget or operations budget. I also, the Zen part, I've been working with a former Zen monk for a couple of years, Alan Knight. We just started a podcast called Zen Power Hour, but working with him and learning to reflect on things, my past, forgiving myself in the past, forgiving others who wronged me, thinking about what I want my present to look like and living in the present moment. And am I doing everything I need to get enough sleep, to surround myself with the right people, to eat well, right? To exercise, all of those things. And then thinking about what you want your future state to look like. And then how do you communicate that to yourself and other people? So these are all just things that we learn that then anybody can apply over and over again. And my mindset shift, going from still feeling a lot of imposter syndrome and just feeling like beating myself up for things that I did in the past that were really life lessons that I needed, has mostly gone away. And I can definitely say I
It
would not
really
be where
does
I'm at.
that.
Yeah, but these techniques have helped, and being able to get into that Zen state and kind of say, I can only control what I can control. I can't control what other people do.
Mhm.
And I know this is what's going to happen because I see it in my future and I'm taking the steps. So I'm calling it into existence. I'm doing the work. I'm not just saying, this is going to happen. But I also am a lot more laid back about a lot of issues because I know that I'm going to get where I want to go. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the journey and everything I learn along the way. So those are some of the things that I've really learned about myself in the past few years and that I hope to bring to other people. Have That's a separate side than the podcast business, but my goal is to make enough money in the podcast business that I can hire some really great people, pay people enough to do great work that will help other people have wonderful podcasts, and then also help Alan Knight, who is an amazing man but not a marketer, right? To be able to get his teachings out to more people so that more people can also be really fulfilled. And I see that as the other side to brand, right? It's really, who are you internally and how do you see yourself in the world so that you can make sure that you see yourself as the best version of you. And then that's what other people see.
Let me go through and ask you some sort of rapid fire questions that might take a little bit less time to answer. What's your favorite productivity hack for podcasting?
Claude,
How do you use Claude?
I set up projects for every single piece of my business and I use it as a thought partner. So it knows everything about my podcast. So if I'm like, I don't really like these questions I have for a guest, I can go and say, interview questions. Here's the guest's LinkedIn. Here's the information they sent over. What are some questions that maybe they haven't been asked or a different way to frame things? And it does a really good job of that. Claude helped me figure out the framework for the agentic AI process that I use to vet podcast guests. Even though I will say OpenAI is better at the research part for those guests. So I use that as one of the main tools. Claude has helped me, as somebody with ADD, be able to say, okay, I'm doing a new presentation, but I'm going to take this from this class that I taught, this research or this article that I wrote, this other thing that's in my head, this thing that I just read, and I need to create a new presentation for this workshop that I'm giving because I don't want it to be the same as everything else I've delivered. And this audience really wants to learn about this part. Give me some ideas. Talk me through how I can change what I have and what's missing. So I just use it as a thought partner. And for podcasting, it's been really highly effective.
What is your favorite tool for personal branding?
I don't know. I'm testing Clio, Kleo, a lot right now for my LinkedIn. I haven't pushed the test button, but I really love the founders and it's going to be a really great tool for me to use to be able to get more of my message out. And I would also say Delphi for my clone.
What would you say is your best single piece of advice for someone starting a podcast?
It's like having a child. A lot of people are going to offer you a lot of advice, but you have to do what's right for you and where you are at in your journey. So think about that. But the most important thing is just to get started. None of us will go back to our first or second episodes and think, I did such a great job. We don't even want you to listen to those episodes. So just get started. You don't have to have a lot of equipment. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Just surround yourself with people, and podcasters are the best community. So I realized, Tom, I turned all your rapid fire questions into a little bit longer. So
That's okay. What would you say is the single book that has been the biggest influence on you
mm,
in any area?
of all time or any time,
Yeah.
Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury.
Why?
It's about a world that's not too dissimilar to the world that we're moving towards. People walk into their homes, they have video walls that talk to them and treat them like a family, right? People use AI in that way sometimes now. Firefighters burned books. There are a lot of places where books are being banned or burned. And so you had to go back to this oral tradition, storytelling, which is what we are doing when we're on podcasts and talking to each other. And so people had to remember books via that. It really affected me because I love reading. I read every day, fiction, nonfiction. Besides listening to podcasts, I listen to audibles as well as reading. And I just think we need to remember what kind of world we want to live in, and a world where people are kind to each other and helping each other and gentle. And that's what in the people who are the ones who love books, right? They're trying to form community and help keep this tradition alive. And so I feel like it's very appropriate now, even though it's a book I read when I was very young, because we are seeing some of those things come to play. And we have to remember where's our humanness and humanity, and how do we keep that centered, even with all this tech that makes our lives easier.
Anika, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but if our listeners wanted to connect with you, listen to your podcast, go to your website, or even read the book that you, I believe, wrote a chapter in as an anthology, where can they go?
LinkedIn is the jam. You will find, yes, I have a website, but LinkedIn featured section makes it really easy to click through. You can click through my Delphi clone and ask her about marketing or branding or PR or any other question under the sun. You can click to set an appointment with me just so that we can have a conversation. You can click to my LinkedIn newsletter, to my podcast. All the links are right there, front and center. And I love connecting with people and having great conversations about how we can make a difference in the world through podcasting.
I think this has just been a delightful recording, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Absolutely, Tom. And I'm excited for you to be with me on your Brand Amplified and to see what other things that we can do together in the future. So thank you.